Dave, unless you have something, I want to move on to Luddism.
That sounds good.
So yeah, I've already seen some people in the comments blanching a little bit at saying Luddism is good, but I'm convinced with the proper understanding of the term that we would all consider ourselves Luddites. So Jathan, for those of us people who are less convinced, how should we understand the legacy of Ned Ludd?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am. It is like my one mission in life, and Ed's one mission in life, to resuscitate and repair the good name of Ned Ludd and Luddism, because right, like Luddism right now, and it does provoke this kind of knee-jerk reaction because the name has been dragged through the mud for a very long time. It is now seen as, it's like a slur in Silicon Valley. It's like the worst possible thing somebody could call you as a Luddite, and for good reason, because right, if we look back at the actual history of Luddism, it is not what it is seen as today, which is this kind of like primitivism, this knee-jerk rejection of all technology, of modern life, and this we just need to go back to some pre-civilization. That's the way that it's seen. But in reality, the Luddites in the early 1800s were a group of workers. It was a worker movement against capital. The Luddites, yes, they smashed the machines, they smashed the looms of these factories, but it wasn't because they were afraid of the competition of these technologies, or they didn't want to use the technologies. They smashed these machines because they were used to make the working conditions of these people a lot worse. They were used to ramp up exploitation, to speed up work, to lower wages, right? They were used as a tool against labor and worker power by capital. And we can see this motivation in the way that the Luddites did not just wantonly smash all of the looms. They were actually quite quite precise about smashing the looms of the factory owners who were notorious for treating their workers really poorly while leaving others alone. Right. So it was in a very serious way a worker movement against capital, hitting capital where it hurts, in their machinery, in their tools of exploitation. And not only that, but I mean, Luddism was a glorious moment of solidarity and collective action by workers. I think the reason that on TMK, Ed and I are really trying to bring back Luddism is because we think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of how we think of tech criticism. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, is understanding tech criticism as something that is fundamentally adversarial, something that should be dangerous to the interest of capital, to the material conditions of capital, while raising up the material conditions of workers. And at the same time, understanding that the reason why the good name of Ned Ludd has been dragged through the mud is because of the capitalist really, saying that this is actually threatening to us. We need to assassinate the character of this. This was one of the first instances of capital asking the state to bring in the army to suppress workers, was the Luddite uprising, and they did. The army came in and killed so-called Luddites and made Luddism a treasonous act, because it was so threatening to the interest of capital.
It's a lesson about activism too, because there's this way that activism is defined. You either have nonviolence or you have terrorism, and sabotage is something different. I mean, I like between those two, and it's, I think, very threatening to the interests of capital. So we shouldn't be surprised at this reaction to Ludd. Jathan, that was great. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I mean, I could go off on this and the linkages to sabotage, because I think, fast forward 100 years later from the Luddites, and you've got the IWW, right, the International Workers of the World, and you've got people like Elizabeth Gurley Flynn writing a brilliant pamphlet in defense of sabotage, right, saying that that like the strike, sabotage is a necessary tool in the workers' arsenal against capital. Like the strike, we should not moralize about sabotage. We should not look down upon or question the motivations of workers who engage in sabotage, but instead understand why they do what they do and how we might support what they do. Right, and that is in the same way. I think what we see of Luddism is it is really about understanding and asking really critical questions. Does this technology contribute to social welfare? Does it contribute to socially beneficial ends? You know, I've called it like the Marie Kondo of technopolitics, right? You hold up this technology, you ask those questions, and if the answer is no, then you throw it in the trash, right? And we need to get more comfortable with understanding technology as something that is not only political, not only human made, but is something that therefore can be unmade, can be deconstructed and dismantled by people for good ends, right? Just because something exists doesn't mean it deserves to exist. And I think that's a myth of determinism that we are sold, is that all we need is innovation, more stuff on top of more stuff on top of more stuff. I think we need to start asking more questions about why we have this stuff and if it deserves to exist.
I think that's on point. It's like, you know, a lot of the way that it's like Luddism is properly understood are people who have like severe fears of technology, or people who don't understand technology. When in fact, the picture that you're painting right here is people who very, very much understand technology and what it's doing to them and doing to their community. And it's something that should be replicated, you know, much more, because especially if you read tech journalism, I know there's a lot of great folks out there who do good tech journalism, but a lot of it, you know, is just, as you were saying earlier, you know, repeating press releases, acting as if these things are, you know, have no effect on like on our material reality, but are just expressions of us uncovering the truth of the being, right? The truth of the world, right? Uncovering the, you know, the tech, you know, that is just always out there, instead of a very specific, a very specific process that is bringing about a particular end. And I think it's important for us to understand, not just as like workers, right? But also in politics, because one thing that was so frustrating, for example, is like, you know, Andrew Yang's campaign in 2020, right? The way that he talked about unemployment, right? It was like, well, this is just a consequence of like the wheels of history moving in a certain way, because technology and robots and artificial intelligence are just reaching a point, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, but we'll just, you know, put a Band-Aid on the bottom, right? It was very attractive to some people, especially like working people were attracted to it, because they're seeing, oh, my job is becoming more automated. There is more surveillance than I've ever experienced. And it's a great tool for, you know, for the wealthy and people like Bezos to say like, yeah, well, this is just the natural order of things, rather than people having to understand it's like, well, no, the technology is being developed in a certain way because you have been historically put onto this, you know, lower rung. Like the working class in this country has been, you know, devastated, you know, for decades and decades and decades. So technology is being used to brutalize you and to turn you more and more into a machine. You know, again, these things are not just coming out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of the coverage around like Amazon over the last, you know, year or so, right? I think also really shows that, you know, the conditions that the Luddites were originally reacting against sounds a whole lot like an Amazon warehouse, right? and you know, it's the fact that these things in capitalism continue to replay themselves. These same relationships continue to replay themselves, but in ways that just are ever intensifying, right? And I think that the reaction to them also demands an equal and opposite reaction, right? One that is increasingly intensifying to meet capital where it is trying to meet us.